And so, what about today's topic? Hmm, interesting. Have you really thought about this? Is your spiritual life okay? And what do you understand by okay? What is that? What is your perspective of okay? And if you have been working hard on it, what is sort of not working out, or what is sort of in the way, in your eyes. But anyway, worry no more to explore this beautiful topic. And yes, definitely food for thought. Yes. We've got our lovely sister Denise Lawrence, who I think most of you do know. A very warm Tuesday morning. Once welcome to Denise. It's over to you, Denise.
Thank you so much, Madhvi, and it's wonderful to be here again with everyone. So, is your spiritual life okay? Why we are looking at this topic is because most people that I have spoken with feel that it's not completely okay. There are still obstacles. There are expectations that we have of ourselves that it should be getting easier as things go by, and it should be getting better. And if it's not fulfilling our expectations, then we believe that maybe we're doing it wrong or something like this. And spiritual life is all about getting free, getting independent. So I want to bring in this idea of freedom and independence into this question: is your spiritual life okay? Now, first of all, the practice and study of Raj Yoga is an education, and any education always starts off easy and becomes progressively more difficult as you move forward with the study, just like any other study. And in many ways, it's about keeping up with it. And you can't expect everything to be a smooth, natural flow. We do hear a lot of like advertising, you can say, advertising that come and do some spiritual work and you will get this and you will get that and life will be easy and so on and so forth. And of course, it really isn't quite like that, because as time goes by, your spiritual life becomes deeper and more subtle. And what that means is that as you go further with it, you encounter resistance. So resistance is normal. When you start to develop yourself spiritually, it means you're going to a greater or lesser extent in a direction that is different from the direction you were going in when you were not specifically developing yourself spiritually. So if you're not developing yourself spiritually, you are going with the flow of everyone else who is mostly developing themselves materially. And one thing that is kind of interesting is to make the distinction between religious development and spiritual development. And I've been thinking about it for a long time. What is this difference between the two? Because I never really think of myself as a religious person. And most of the people I know and I'm friendly with in the practice of Raj Yoga are also not particularly religious, but highly spiritual. And yet there are many, many who come into a spiritual practice from a more religious type of mentality, not necessarily religious life, but mentality in the sense that people assume that spiritual and religious is one and the same thing, but it really isn't. Spiritual means to be more subtle. It means to be more aware of the laws of spirituality. And when we're looking at this question, is your spiritual life okay? I think it's worthwhile to take a look at these fundamentals, and that is, are you aware of the laws of spirituality? And one of them is that any effort that you make cannot go unrewarded, but you may not get your reward right away. You may not get your results right away, because spiritual practice, spiritual life is deep, and it corresponds with the part of yourself that is eternal. And once you start thinking of yourself as, okay, I'm a spiritual being functioning in a material environment, but what I am is a spiritual being. That means you are in contact with a different type of sense of time, because a person who is developing themselves spiritually becomes aware that the self, the soul, the deeper part is eternal and immortal. And so developing yourself spiritually means thinking about your immortality. And of course, not many people think about their immortality because you don't really think in a material world about being immortal except through leaving a legacy, or after you die, you become famous, that sort of immortality. But I'm talking about something a little different here. And it's to do with results. So when you do a spiritual practice, you meditate, you study, you start to understand how the laws of spirituality impact our regular everyday life. You start living more consciously about that, which means that when you have to make a decision, when you have to choose what to do, you're choosing in the context of, okay, the normal external circumstances, but also in the context of your inner world. And the inner world of a person is where your feelings live. It's where your deep sensitivity lives. It's where your destiny lives. And the more you make contact with the inner world, the more you're in touch with things about yourself that are outside the tangible and the visible. So when you're meditating, it takes you to that inner world. And as you start doing it, on one hand, it feels really good because it takes you to a place which is the real you. But on the other hand, it's different. Other people around you maybe are not engaged in spiritual life. And so it's unknown territory. It's new and different. And because many people tell you things like, you should feel this and you should feel that, and then you say, okay, but I'm not feeling it, so maybe I'm not doing it right. You start to get doubts, and then you get confused, and then you think it's not for you. But no, let's look at the laws of spirituality, because they never change. They're always like that since before the ancient past, and they will be there into the far distant future. These are unchangeable laws. So they're really good to know. And the first thing to know is that you have always been the self that you are now. And the self that you are now is very complex, made up of all sorts of different personalities and sub-personalities. So one important part of your spiritual life is the process of integrating all these different like identities. Of course, you're one person, but you have different characters that you express in different circumstances. And so one of the laws of spirituality is to know that you are fundamentally an actor and that it's absolutely normal to perform according to the needs of the time, the needs of the circumstances. Just as you dress according to circumstances, if you're going to a formal event, you dress formally. If you're going for a picnic in the summer, maybe by the river, you may bring your swimming clothes and you may dress very casually. If you're going to a sporting event as a participant, you'll wear the suitable sports clothes. And not only do you wear the different appropriate clothings according to the circumstance, but you also behave according to that circumstance. And that's all about acting. It doesn't mean it's fake, but acting means that you are performing a part and you are also choosing to do acts, and your acts are your karma. So when you're looking at this question, is my spiritual life okay? It means also I must look at, how's my karma? Is my karma okay? And your karma is how you feel about yourself, how you think, what you think about, why you think about it, who you choose to be around, what you choose to say or not say. There's so many different aspects about it. You may be very social, so then you say a lot. You may be introverted and quiet, then you say only what you think is really worth saying, but you don't engage in idle chatter because it doesn't turn you on. So all of these things are acts, all of them are karma. So spiritual life has to do with aligning who you are and what you do in terms of thinking, feeling, saying, not saying, choosing, doing things. And what you want is for all of it to correspond and align with your essence, your essential self. So the first part of spiritual practice is to do with making contact with your essence. And so the first lesson of spirituality is to affirm and assert that I am a pure, powerful, peaceful, loving, blissful being of light who is operating in a physical body, in all sorts of circumstances, with all kinds of other people who may or may not be aware in this way, and who may or may not be interested in doing pure karma or good karma. But there you are, that's your identity. And what you are and how you feel at any given moment may not be the same, because you may be a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light, but you may feel distressed, confused, irritated, emotional, and then you may think that, oh, I'm not getting this right. I have to make myself be something different. but no, that's too gross of an understanding. This sense of identity is like a baseline. And when you come into action through the body, you move off your baseline into action, which is all sorts of things, good, bad, and indifferent. And then you return to the baseline in the little space in between one performance and the next performance. And one of the good things to practice is this return to your baseline. And so in Raj Yoga, we have some words that refer to that. And one that is very, very well known is Om Shanti. So Om Shanti is a beautiful expression that means many, many things, but fundamentally it means I'm at peace, I'm at rest, I'm still, I'm in between performances, and I am back at my base of stillness. And let go of whatever happened just now so that I am unpolluted by whatever that was. And I start from zero and come into action through the body, interacting with different people and different places, different circumstances. And then when that's finished, let it be, return back to base. And this is a good practice. And if you're very aware, you'll do it. Obviously, you get caught up in circumstances and situations and forget to do it because it's a new way to do things. But to know that it is worth doing these things and returning to base lets you actually maintain a state of being okay when circumstances are really not okay. And it allows you to let go and be still and return to your center, yourself, and then get on with the next thing. I think a very, very good aspect of spiritual health is the ability to let go. And that's a skill which you develop gradually. One of the obstacles, and there are many, many obstacles, but one of the obstacles that everyone has to deal with is their conditioning. And your conditioning has to do with how you grew up, your education, your life circumstances, because everybody grows up in, to a greater or lesser extent, some kind of chaos, some kind of craziness. People are not always good. And then as a young person, you learn to deal with that, you learn to process it. But all of these experiences go in. And spiritual practice has to do with how you process these things that go in. How do they go in? They go in through your senses. What you see, what you hear, what you feel in the atmosphere, what is not done that should be done, that also goes in. And so all of this goes in and it creates a distortion of the spirit. And then you are predisposed to respond to circumstances, not in a neutral way, but according to these different distortions. So part of spiritual health and feeling that your spiritual life is okay is where you're able to straighten out these distortions as they appear. And this is why this practice of returning to base is really very good, because it's a way of returning to something that's undistorted. And your normal baseline is anyway distorted because that's how you grew up. That's your conditioning. It's a distortion of some sort. And your essential spiritual self, your being that is independent of anything that has happened in this lifetime or even any other lifetimes, that is the state of being a pure, peaceful, powerful, lovable, blissful being of light who functions through a body in all sorts of circumstances. And that assumes that you're like a piece of paper, a white piece of paper where nothing is on, but it isn't like that. You go into your spiritual practice with all sorts of things, marks and tears and all sorts of things on your base. And what you're doing in your spiritual practice is, in some sense, you're including them. You are having a sense that, okay, they're there, they're not the essential you, they're there, and they are, they very often get in the way, but you're able to get behind them so that the influence of these things gets reduced. One of the things that happens to people through conditioning, say, for example, if you grew up in a family where people didn't pay much attention to you, they maybe paid attention to other people in the family and not you, so you feel a bit neglected or abandoned. And it gives you the idea that maybe you're not okay. So that goes into your conditioning. And when you start to develop your spirituality, there is this niggling, nagging idea that maybe I'm not okay. And it sometimes really becomes a strong inner voice. And when you hear such a thing like that, because you study, because you know stuff, you say to yourself, okay, that thought comes from my conditioning. And maybe I really listened to it for many years, but now I have options. I don't have to take it seriously because I know deep, deep down that behind all of that, I'm a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light. And I didn't just begin when I got born into this body, but I was there before that. And at the end of this body, I will still be there. So that means I have to think about my immortality. And what is my immortality? It's continuity, but it's also my immortality is impacted by what happens day to day in life, and maybe an accumulation of many lifetimes, which means on some level, I really don't know who I am because of all these distortions. So is my spirituality or is my spiritual life okay? We would say yes when I'm able to reestablish contact with my deepest essence and know that that is the real me. Now, some of these scars and marks and karmic accounts and all these things, these traumas and so on, they are deep scars. And deep scars take longer to work on. And another thing about deep scars is when you're not looking at your spiritual life, you're unaware of the deep scars. And as you begin your spiritual life, they come to the surface because the purpose of spiritual life is to return to your original condition. So this statement, this affirmation that you give to yourself. I am a pure, peaceful, powerful, lovable, blissful being of light. This is what you are before anything ever happened. And to return to that means you have to revisit whatever happened. And whatever happened was good, bad, or indifferent. If it was good, that's great. If it was not good, it may have left a deep scar. And so when you encounter something that just won't allow you to be your essential self, a big block comes, a big thing that comes in the way and says, oh, you're not that, you're something else, you're this, you're really not okay, or some kind of internal message like this, then you use not your feelings, but you use your knowledge to deal with that. One of the things that grows gradually in spiritual practice is your spiritual powers. And one of the spiritual powers that's really interesting is called the power to face. And the power to face is like you're not really having a knee-jerk reaction to avoid, run away, disappear, melt, check out, or any of these normal responses when any deep scar comes to the surface and troubles you. But the power to face is, okay, show yourself. Let me see you. Let me understand you. Because the spiritual practice is about becoming neutral in the face of these type of deep scars that come up. And saying to yourself, so be it. It is what it is. It doesn't mean that I'm not okay. It doesn't mean I deserve ill treatment or something like that. It just happened. And there's a very good little phrase that you can pay attention to, make note of. And when something like this comes up, you say to yourself, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And that gives you a positioning in your consciousness of letting it be whatever it is. And we all are impacted by cultural attitudes that say so-and-so is bad, therefore we have to be against it. So-and-so is good, we have to be for it. And we find ourselves swinging backwards and forwards between good things and bad things. However, when you, instead of that, you say, okay, it is what it is. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And I am me. And me is a pure, peaceful, powerful, lovable, blissful being of light who may well be moving around in a movie set that is a horror movie or something like that, or is totally boring or irrelevant or uncomfortable, any of these things, but it's just a movie. And it doesn't mean it's not real. It is real, but it's also passing. So there's a very interesting spiritual law to be aware about in this. And that is that whatever is going on, it cannot remain eternally, because all these things that are going on in the material world, in the social world, and so on, they arise, they persist for a while, and then they fall away. But you do not. You are permanent. And so spiritual practice is to be able to affirm, I am a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light in the middle of a crazy situation, in the middle of people who don't understand me, in the middle of people who may not treat me very well, in the middle of all sorts of things that make me want to doubt myself. And yet it is what it is. And I am me, the pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful being of light. And all this will pass. And I will use my powers to help me get through it. You see, because when it's difficult, then you need extra power. Sometimes you need to be able to endure. And so when you meditate regularly, you build up this power. And your spiritual life being okay does not mean that you feel some kind of okay feeling all the time. And because of your feeling, you know that you're okay. No, that is much too easy, and it doesn't really work like that. Whether you feel okay or not, what's good is to know that you're okay, because as you continue to meditate, to study, to do pure karma, you are accumulating power, but you won't necessarily feel what you're accumulating. I think sometimes people make the great mistake of assuming that if you can't feel it, it's not there, you know. So I think that we need to really make a difference, make a distinction between believing that something is there only if you can feel it, and on the other hand, knowing that something is there whether or not you can feel it. And that depends on your ability to understand what's happening within you, and to understand that if you are doing the practice very systematically and regularly, then whether it feels like it or not, but you are accumulating strength. And that strength, every so often you feel it, and then you think, wow, great, but it doesn't last very long. So what does this mean? Because it's very important for us to understand the meaning of what we feel. And first of all, it doesn't mean that something's there or not there. When you feel your spiritual strength all of a sudden, then it's called a gift. Because if you don't feel it, you will stop believing it. So every so often you get to feel it just out of the blue. And this is why it's good to call it a gift, because it reminds you that it's there. It's not that it just happened at that moment. You were given the gift of feeling it so that you know it's there, so that you trust it, so that you believe it without having to feel it. One analogy about this is perfume. You know, when you first open a bottle of perfume or spray some perfume on yourself or into the room, you can smell it, but you can't smell it for long. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that the nature of feeling things is you feel it for a short time so that you know it's there. And then now that you know it's there, you don't need to feel it anymore, because you can think about it. If you would feel everything very intensely all the time, there'd be too many feelings and you wouldn't be able to distinguish the important ones. So no, our sense perception is by nature ephemeral. That means you will feel something for a little while, you know it's there, and then it'll go away. But the problem when you believe in feelings only and not in knowing is you think if you can't feel it, it's not there. This is an illusion. This is a delusion. So sometimes if you don't feel okay, then you think you're not okay. But once you have sensed and experienced that you're really okay, then you have to commit that to memory and know that you're okay. Make it firm for yourself that you are okay, that you are loved, that you are valuable, and you have all your rights intact, and you need to go about your business knowing yourself to be fully okay. All of these are very important. Now, sometimes you will say, okay, well, I'm not sure how to evaluate the quality of my spiritual life. And so here are a few tips. And one tip is to do with your practice. So, of course, there will be times when you find it difficult to do the practice, or you fall away from it because there are interruptions, your biological clock goes upside down from traveling, or other interruptions. You may have a period of illness which disturbed the regularity of your practice, and so on and so forth. And usually you can set it back again fairly quickly. There are times, though, when you feel absolutely and totally blocked. And this is also normal. This is part of the course. And you may struggle with a block like that. But whenever you have a block, it can mean many things. But one important thing it means is that the level at which you're doing your spiritual practice, you've completed that, and now you need to do it on another level. And to get to another level means you have to rise. And if you stay on the same level, you will not get to another level just like that, just by pushing against the block. But it's all about really going deep into yourself and reassessing who you are, what you want, what you think spiritual life means, and give yourself enough time to arrive at a conclusion that satisfies you, and be aware that you're in a period of change where you are shifting from one level to a completely other level, and that it doesn't happen just fast. Sometimes it takes a year or two, sometimes longer, sometimes it's a day or two. It could be very quick. And I think when it takes a long time, you can get many doubts about yourself and who you are. And these are actually healthy, because the way that you have seen yourself, looked at yourself, understood yourself, etc., it's as if all that is now no longer relevant, because anyway you're shifting, anyway you're developing and growing and maturing. And the maturation process of a soul is deep and subtle and varied. And so you need time to allow yourself, like in a sense, be in a cocoon, like a caterpillar goes in a cocoon, and it sits there for a pretty long time before it emerges as a butterfly. And sometimes people think that you just do this only one time. But there are analogies in the animal kingdom where you find yourself having to go through this many times. Like, for example, a lobster. I don't know if you know this, but a lobster, if you've seen a lobster, is quite big, but it starts off pretty little. And how does it go from little to big when it is a creature that has an exoskeleton? So we human beings have internal skeletons, and our bones grow and we grow with them. But a lobster has a skeleton that's on the outside, and the fleshy part of the lobster grows until the skeleton is too tight. and it can't fit. And so it has to burst out of it and throw away that little insufficiently big exoskeleton. And then it has no protection for a while until it grows a new one. And this happens 8 times in the life of a lobster, if it lasts that long, until it gets to its full adult form. And this is a very interesting analogy, because sometimes for you, you just grow and the exoskeleton of your spiritual practice is just not at the level that you need it to be, because you have grown and you need to shift to a different level. And so you have to cast aside the little skeleton that you're in, or the little environment that you're in, so that you can function on a higher, more mature, more developed, more wide, broad, deep spiritual practice. And this can be scary, because you no longer can function as you were, but you haven't grown into anything else. So this is difficult. Just like for the lobster, when he doesn't have his skeleton, he has to go and hide, or he's vulnerable, he's in danger, any predator could come and get him. So it's difficult while he's growing his new exoskeleton. So maybe you might find yourself at a time like that. And when you do, I think the important quality is patience and trust. Because when you go deep inside of yourself and you really look at what kind of a being you are, what you'll see is, yes, it's true. I am fundamentally a pure, peaceful, powerful, lovable, blissful being of light. And I'm a good quality human being, and my values and my understanding, everything, all my motivations, everything is on track. You have a good, clear, clean conscience, but everything feels strange and disconcerting. But you have made the evaluation that, yeah, you're on track. And so you need to understand that, okay, now I'm in a period of transition. I don't know how long it's going to go on for. I don't know what I'm transitioning into, but whatever it is, I am like the lobster, losing my current exoskeleton because I'm too big for it. And I just have to have the patience and the will to sit tight and allow the new one to form itself around me. And then when it's stable and steady, I will carry on this new level of spiritual life and be there. So that is just a very useful thing to know, that your growth and development is a lifelong journey. And it's not just a quick fix by any means. It's not that, okay, you learn to meditate and after, a month or two, there you are, a perfect meditator. It really isn't like that, because it's the deepening, the broadening, the development of a human being who starts off distorted, bashed and battered by life and circumstances, who is returning to the original state. And even though you are an immortal soul, you are not a changeless soul. The soul changes, the soul gets old, the soul gets bashed and battered by life. The soul loses power, gets distorted. And so spiritual practice is this return to an original state, and which is done by pure vibrations. So meditation is important because you set up the vibrations that allow you to return to your original condition, which you experience during these huge, long time cycles every once in a while. And we are at such a time where all of us are in this process of returning to our original condition. So it's a big change within, a big change outside. We know about climate change. It's like the earth itself is also, in a way, returning to its own original condition. And everything is going to be beautiful, wonderful, perfect. But to get there, we have to be patient, trusting, understanding, study, keep going, face everything, get past it, move on, and we will arrive at our beautiful destination. So I think I will leave it there and turn it over to Madhavi. Thank you so much. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, Om Shanti. I tell you what, you could have gone on and on, Denise. Honestly, it's. I think you've actually covered such a lot of things in there. And when you were talking about the karma, one of the sisters wrote to me and said that, OMG, I never thought of checking, the quality of my life, spiritual life, as, she didn't connect it to that. Anyway, so thank you so much. So Dipti is asking, she says, I'm able to have control over my mind and intellect at times. But old sanskars emerge sometimes when I come into interaction with people with whom I have a deep and not so good karmic account. What should I do?
This is really the time when your powers are required. And if you are experiencing difficulty in those circumstances, it's because you need to intensify and increase your power and your skill. So all these circumstances are essential because they force you to be attentive and develop your skills in the situation, in the action, because we cannot afford to be theoretical yogis. That's never going to work. You have to be real and in the situation, and that requires skill and power. And if we don't have those difficult situations, we won't be able to get it right. So they are absolutely required.
This came on quite early. It says, how do I love myself? How to learn that?
Well, it's a very, very deep matter, loving oneself, because, there are a few people in this world who love themselves naturally, and that's a blessing. But most people, as they grow up, if they are loved by their carers and reflected with loving eyes and loving attention, then they know that they're loved, and then they can love themselves. So the way that we grow up makes a huge difference. And many, many people, because of the times we are in and so on, people who are parents are also spiritually depleted. They have many stresses. They don't necessarily know how to love themselves, and they don't know how to love a child necessarily. And so all of these wounds get accumulated generation by generation. And in my analysis, all of it goes back to times of war when everything is so chaotic, stressful, and horrible that all of the spiritual qualities get really blasted apart. And then you come into a so-called peaceful time, but quite wrecked, from this train wreck of a war, which goes on for generation to generation to generation. And so we have this possibility of a close interaction in the mind with God, the Supreme Being, who is called the Ocean of Love. And so very much part of spiritual practice is to understand how much the heart and mind and being had closed down because of experiences of not love, not seeing people love each other, not receiving love, not knowing how to give it. And so very often when you turn your attention to God, the Supreme Being, you will receive a feeling of being loved. And this is a very important one. You are not going to feel it often or all the time, but it is something to cultivate and think about and affirm that I am lovable. And I think loving yourself has very much to do with, do you value yourself so that you will perform such karma which is really good for you? Because love means do something which is good for. So if you love somebody else, you do something which is good for them. Love yourself, just keep doing things that are good for you. Understand what you need and give it to yourself. If it's time, if it's attention, if it's right kind of food, right kind of study, right kind of, or whatever it is that is really good for you. That is loving the self.
And so it's Sean, and he says, I have been trying to meditate since I joined these classes once 9 months ago, but no success at all. The affirmations feel so fake and make believe. How do I know I really am originally like that?
Well, you don't, you see, you don't at all, because you will only know when you get it, you see. And so this is why much more importance is to give attention to the study, because the spiritual study gives you a lot of concepts that you may be familiar with and some that you may not be familiar with. And you have to think about it deeply until you get it. And that is the meaning of meditation. The meditation means to think deeply about what's worth thinking about. And when you think that you're not successful, it means you're assuming that if you do some certain type of thing, that some other thing will happen to you. That's not meditation. If you work with an affirmation that seems fake to you, then don't work with it. You need to look at the study until you find a point or a phrase or a concept that is meaningful to you, and then sit with that and really go into it in your mind, focus on it and think about it upside, downside, left side, right side, inside, outside. Really focus on it from all angles, gather together everything you can think of about that until it makes itself clear in your mind. And you arrive at something that I call a knowing. And you say, yeah, I have really deeply thought about this, and I know from inside that it is so. That is meditation.
But the other thing that Denise mentioned, which I think is key, is patience with yourself.
You want real stuff. And that means you have to do the archaeology. You have to look at the study and really dig deep until you find something that is meaningful. And then you have to work with that. You have to extract the essence. This is not an easy matter by any means.
So is it a spiritual law to align with nature, like go to bed, right at the right night time and rise up before the sunrise. Then what about those who work at odd hours and night times? How can these workers benefit?
Well, I don't think it's anything to do with aligning with nature. The thing is this, this word Raj Yoga is called Sahaj Raj Yoga, and people always translate the word Sahaj to mean easy, but it doesn't mean only easy. What it means is in context. And so you have to do this practice in your context. And if your context happens to be that you are working a night shift or any of these others, then you have to make an adjustment. Because if you think that your yoga is only going to work if you get up at a certain time and go to bed at a certain time, that's very physical. That's not spiritual. And while it is true that in the normal, like you can say that the world in which this Raj Yoga was developed is an agricultural world. In which everybody gets up very early. It's the context of Hindu bhakti, where everybody gets up very early anyway, and they do all their rituals and ablutions and whatnot. You get up very early, so what's happening very early is it's quiet. And so you can have some quiet time, and all the disturbances are not there because the other people are still asleep. So if you are in a big family and so on, the only quiet time you're going to get is early morning, you see. And of course, the atmosphere is very nice at that time. But, do not be limited by physical things, calling them spiritual because they're physical. And you can meditate at any time. But if you want to take advantage of quiet time externally, then when it appears, use it, choose it. And we cannot really be concerned about everybody else primarily. We have to be, first of all, concerned about the self and what can I do to make my spiritual practice optimized. And if you focus on that, because you can't do anything about anybody else's life, but you can do a lot about your own.
Okay, so Jayashree wants to know. She says, I get lots of waste thoughts when I sit for yoga or meditation, and she always gets disturbed.
Normal, it's supposed to be like that, but you're supposed to deal with them. That's yoga. Yoga is not something you sit down and you start ooming and eyeing and think that all the pink clouds are going to come floating in. That is not yoga at all. That may be advertising. But no, yoga is in the context of waste thoughts, distractions, blah, blah, blah. You decide what you're going to meditate on and you focus on it and you set aside all those waste thoughts. This is work.
What powers to use when making a decision at a critical moment with not much time given, but to respond quickly under felt pressure? How to discriminate and feel happy with the decision after it's been made?
Well, it's always a risk when you make a decision, even if you sit for hours and hours and make it, or if you make it very quickly. But having to make a decision under pressure quickly happens from time to time. But your spiritual practice is something that you need to work with in a regular way, which means that if you are doing the practice and going deep into the study and meditating by really thinking deeply about what's worth thinking about, then you're exercising your mind and intellect to a point where it is capable and competent to respond quickly under pressure at the time when it comes. So you don't do the effort suddenly and unexpectedly when it comes. You do the effort well in advance, and then every so often a test will come. You don't study at the time of exams, you study before, and then the exams come and you respond to them because you're ready.
family members cook meat, I've tried to ignore it, but the smell stays in the house for so long, even if I open all the windows. How do I deal with this?
You know, Raj Yoga is given in the context of adversity, and the smell is a sense perception. And so Raj Yoga is about making yourself free and independent of sense perceptions. And another way of looking at it is include it. You see, if you make yourself ultra super sensitive and you have to have perfect conditions in which to do this, you will remain weak. But if you do this in conditions of adversity and do it anyway, whether it smells good or bad, so what? Because these are all, many people thinking that your sense perceptions are your spirituality. And in fact, your sense perceptions are nothing to do with your spirituality, but they invade it, they get in the way. And your spiritual practice is to do everything in spite of these obstacles. And this is how you become free, independent, strong, and in an attitude of equanimity. That is what spiritual practice is all about.
I had a hellish experience in this birth, and I'm haunted by the fact that I will relive this eternally. And this can block everything. And it's serious because I'm now 85, and so not much time to deal with overcoming this. Any help? Any tips, Denise?
I think that over time, every single one of us has been through what we may choose to call hellish experiences. And for some people, hellish is not that bad. And for somebody else, not that bad is really hellish. And so it's a bit subjective. But the thing is, even if a hellish experience happened, a really hellish experience, you will survive it. You did survive it. I was talking yesterday with a good friend who was dealing with knowing how another friend had been extremely viciously, horrifically tortured to death. And you still have to deal with it. Whatever happens, the soul emerges from hellish situations, and the trauma of the hellish situation leaves its mark, and slowly it fades. And what you need to do is bring yourself into the resonance, very pure, beautiful resonance between yourself, the soul, and God, the Supreme Soul, because that resonance is very, very different from the resonance of a hellish experience. And when you keep yourself in the resonance with incorporeal Supreme God, this pure, harmonious resonance can actually retroactively neutralize that hellish experience and calm and essentially undo the mark that it leaves. Because this is an experience that you're aware of because it's in this life, but there's all sorts of other hellish experiences in other lives and maybe in the future that you're not aware of, but they exist and we get through them. So in your meditation with the Supreme Being, go into that resonance and allow it to take precedence over that hellish experience, which you can say, okay, it was hellish, it was not good, it was what it was, and let it be and move on.
Maria is saying, she does feel loss of freedom because of she feels suffocated by all the rules and regulations, etc., etc. Anything you can add to it?
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. I currently live in France, and France is the ocean of rules and regulations. And French people say, you know what? There are so many endless rules and regulations that it's too much to even remember, let alone comply with. So people just don't follow the rules because there's too many. And so you have to follow the I don't call them rules myself. I call them recommendations, and they're very simple. So you can simplify it. All you have to do is be soul conscious, strive to connect yourself in connection with the Supreme Being, strive to do what, according to your conscience and study, is pure karma, and be easy. And that's good enough. You know, you don't have to be caught up in 50 million rules. I don't think so.
Anonymous, in my spiritual journey, when good times come, I'm at ease in my comfort zone. That's a time when I unconsciously spiral downwards. What practices can I do when I experience good times to avoid procrastination, laziness, etc., etc.?
Well, I'd have to tighten up your practice and get with the program, because as I said, this program is work. If you want to, if you want to get something out of it, you have to put something into it. There's no free lunch. You can't just float along expecting to arrive in nirvana without doing the work for it. That's never happened. It never will. So comfort zone means you're being lazy. So when you get in your comfort zone, okay, that's up to you. But you have to decide at what level you want to do the work, and accordingly, you will get the results of your efforts. But no effort, no results. Simple as that. It's all in your hands. If you want to do Raj Yoga and meditation and so on, it may bring up all kinds of trauma, at which point you may need to do a course of therapy to sort out your psychological side, because, you cannot really go far ahead in a spiritual practice unless you've sorted out your psychological stuff. But psychological stuff and spiritual work is not the same thing, but they're very connected.
Now, everyone is going to join you in your final short meditation, Denise.
Well, thank you. And because it has been asked, how to meditate, let me go through a meditation on this point. How is my spirituality? So this is the topic. How is my spirituality? That means I make a commitment to myself to not allow myself to be distracted by any other topic, because this is my chosen topic. But first of all, I must define spirituality for myself. What do I mean by my spirituality, my spiritual life? There are many ways to define it. I choose to define it as the quality of my connection with the Supreme Being and absorption of spiritual energy into myself. How am I doing on that? So let me go as deep inside as I can. Bring myself into connection with my own spiritual essence. Withdrawing from sense perception. I go into an internal quiet space. I detach from my bond to the physical body and sense perception. I turn my attention to the point of light that I am. I focus on being that. This allows me to shift to another non-physical dimension of light. My focus of attention is on that world of light with myself as a being of light. And in that world of light, I focus on the incorporeal being of light that is the Supreme Soul. I lock myself in focus. It takes much energy to establish this focus. Once established, I do not need to use so much energy. I am outside the gravitational pull of distractions. The flow of energy begins. I am steady, still, and focused. I become completely subtle. The energy flows in. I lose sense of time. I am silent. My spirituality is all right. I could stay like this for a long, long time. But in the interests of time, I return back to my normal, connected state, connected with the material world, satisfied that my spiritual connectedness, my ability, my focus is all right. It is intact. All is well. Om Shanti.